Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Margaret Warner and her distinguished panel.
Well, good evening to all of you. It's great to see all of you here. And we added this sort of last-minute pre-dinner panel to talk about the issue that's hot on everyone's mind, but hadn't had a dedicated panel this session. So it's Libya, of course. I don't think I need a big drum roll of introduction to all of you about why the issue's important. But I could give you a quick update on what's happened today, because while you've been in this conference, some things have been happening. Airstrikes, of course, are continuing in Libya itself. In Doha, Qatar, the contact group of Libyan rebels, along with NATO and regional partners of all sorts in the African Union, all met. And at that meeting, they did come out and say that Qadhafi absolutely must go, and in tougher language than they've used before, than they used 2 weeks ago. There was a discussion about arming the rebels, with the Crown Prince of Qatar actually urging that that be done, but there was no agreement on that. However, they did agree to set up a trust fund that's going to be financed through both oil revenues and donations, international donations, that will channel money to the Transitional National Council in Benghazi so it can pay salaries and so forth. So that's sort of the news of the day, and I think we're going to just jump right into it. We are going to go until exactly 7 o'clock because we're going to lose Senator McCain then. I'm going to definitely save some time for questions, so whatever I don't cover, you all can jump right in. Senator McCain, and of course you know our distinguished panelists, Senator McCain, Republican of Arizona, Ambassador Aujali, Ambassador formerly of Libya, now of the Transitional National Council, and Martin Indyk of Brookings. So, Senator McCain, you were an early proponent of intervention of a no-fly zone. How's it going?
Not too well. I think it's pretty clear that if we had declared a no-fly zone, that when the rebels clearly had momentum on their side, momentum is mass in warfare, that most likely the conflict would have been over. But that's history. I think it's important to recognize that we appreciate the contributions of all of our allies, especially the British and the French, and the efforts they're making. But the reality is that the United States is NATO. And when you say that we're handing it over to NATO, you're handing it over to people and countries with limited capabilities and limited assets. And we appreciate what the British and the French are doing, but when you withdraw our most capable assets from the battlefield, the AC-130s and the A-10s, then you lose a significant capability.
They are gunships that can really...
Yeah, the AC-130s are the gunships that actually go all the way back to the Vietnam War. And the A-10 is the most capable air-to-ground weapon system. Our allies just don't have that. And I guess I won't extend my answer much longer, but I do believe that we can still succeed in defeating Qadhafi on the battlefield if we recognize the provisional government, if we help them with intelligence, if we jam his communications, if we provide or arrange for the provision of weapons to them. We were able, in the Afghan conflict, able to get weapons to the fighters there, and I think we can still achieve success. The worst result, obviously, would be a very bad result, would be a stalemate.
But just briefly, you think the U.S. should get more re-engaged militarily, as
absolutely.
the rebels were suggesting today?
Absolutely. We have assets and capability that our NATO allies and friends just don't have. I appreciate the comments of the French foreign minister and President Sarkozy. I appreciate the effort that they're making, but they just don't have the sustainability. When you look at how much they have invested in weapon systems and capabilities, it's just reality. And so it's too bad, and I would love to see our assets back in the fight.
Okay.
My understanding of the resolution was that we would take all means necessary for humanitarian purposes. That didn't say just Benghazi. As we are speaking right now, as you know, in Misrata, there's no electricity, there's no water, and there are people who are dying under the assault of Qadhafi's forces.
Let me go to Martin Indyk on this. Martin Indyk, as I recall, you did support the no-fly zone. Do you think the U.S., though, should get re-engaged now in an offensive way with airstrikes to protect civilians?
First of all, let me say that I'm a huge admirer of Senator McCain. I'm very grateful to him for joining us today at short notice. I don't think there's anybody that can match the service that Senator McCain has given to our country. So I just want to make it clear, because it's not comfortable. It's not comfortable for me to be in a situation of disagreeing with him. I usually agree with everything he says, even though I'm a Democrat and he's a Republican. But in this case, I guess I have a different point of departure, I think, which is that the United States does have a humanitarian interest in preventing Qadhafi from killing his people. And that's why I supported the intervention. But in my view, the United States does not have a vital strategic interest in what happens in Libya. We have a humanitarian interest, but not a vital strategic interest. And that's why, even though it took some time, and yes, there was some momentum lost, nevertheless, it was important to wait for the Arab League to call for the intervention, for the UN Security Council to provide its imprimatur in a very clear way, as the Senator said, to protect the civilians, and that others who do have a vital interest, Europeans for whom Libya is more of a vital interest than it is for us, should be the ones who take the lead, including in the military operations. And so while I'm sure that we can do more damage if we sent our aircraft in I think it's very important that it's NATO that takes the lead. It's the French and the British who were the gung-ho parties here. They be the ones to take the lead, because where this is heading, now that the contact group in Doha have declared that Qadhafi should go now, where it's heading is to a situation in which the only way in which the objectives of that contact group are going to be achieved is by boots on the ground. There isn't a force capable on the ground, Libyan force organised and capable of going in there and taking Qadhafi out. So that's, to me, an issue for the Libyan people. It's an issue for those who have a vital interest. But we've got a lot of other interests at play in the region. I mean, there are at least 200 Syrians that have been killed. Are we going to intervene there now militarily on the same basis? I think we really have to be very clear about where our interests lie, and there's a humanitarian concern, but not what we're doing equals the level of our interest.
Ambassador Aujali, weigh in here. Of course, I know today the Transitional National Council called for the U.S. to get more re-engaged, but why? And what about the point that Martin Indyk raised and also Senator Kerry raised on this stage yesterday, that really it's better for the West to be patient and to let the Libyan people make whatever regime change is going to occur, that on balance and over time, that is going to be a better result?
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy and proud to be here tonight. Senator McCain, thank you very much. You are a champion. You've been supporting the Libyan people from the beginning. I'm very proud of you. Mark, nice to be with you too. But I find myself, I am leaning to my right side completely. And I find myself also in a position to say that what Senator McCain said is really what the Libyan people is looking for. It is not a matter of interest now. It is a matter of a human being. The Libyan people, they are patient for 42 years. Unfortunately, they cannot do it by themselves. Many people, many students been hanging in 1975. 1,200 Libyan politician prisoners were killed in one day. Then they scream and they plead for the international community to come and help them. Of course, the Americans, they came and they play an important role, but unfortunately, changing course in the middle of the race is not always good. The NATO, they trying their best, but at a certain time, at a certain period, the action was not at the right time, at the right place. And this is give the Gaddafi time to bring more mercenaries, to bring more forces, and attack more cities. The situation in Libya now, people under the dictatorship for a long time, they've been trying very hard to change it, but they cannot do it. Now the region, north of Africa, Tunisia, Egypt, and Libya. Libya cannot exist under this regime anymore. We have two democratic regimes now on the east and on the west. And if we want the security and the stability of this region, then change must take place in Libya. The interest of United States and the interest of Europe, yes, we have more relation, we are closer to Europe, this is true. But also United States, you are interested to see people that they make their choice. Since I came to this country, I've been talking to the people. I find the United States, they are encouraging the young people, helping them, educate them to make a change in their countries. Then this is the time. Libyan, they came out, they find themselves at a sudden in a real battlefield without any thinking to fight the regime.
Let me jump in here and just put another issue on the table, which the Senator flicked at, and just hear what you all have to say, which has to do with arming the rebels. The United States so far has shown a kind of reluctance. It's on the theory that we don't really know who these rebels are. But Senator McCain, where are you on that?
Well, first of all, I want to make it perfectly clear, I don't support American troops or anybody's boots on the ground. That would be not only non-productive but counterproductive. I think there's lots of ways of arming the rebels. The Egyptians are already, let's be very honest, have already provided some assistance. But it would take a while because you not only have to provide the arms, you have to have the training as well. But again, in the Afghan conflict, we showed that there's ways of providing arms, equipment, and training to the rebels. Could I just
Indirectly.
mention, going back to our previous question, if I could just say, was former President Bill Clinton that said it's not a fair fight. And it wasn't a fair fight, and it isn't a fair fight. And I learned in the Vietnam War that air power alone doesn't do the job. But this is the ideal terrain and situation for air power to be used. And we need people in on the ground to identify targets, whether those are Libyans or other nationalities. It's also a vital part of it. And finally, could I say, Margaret, the whole world is watching, but also the Arab world is watching. If we say that American policy is that Qadhafi must go, and we don't implement that policy, and we end up in a stalemate, that sends a message throughout the Arab world to these other people like Bashar Assad and others, that a message that I don't think is something that we want to transmit.
Martin Indyk on that point.
Arming and training the rebels is, I think, an important thing to do. But it's not necessary for the United States to do that. There are others that in the coalition against Qadhafi that can do that. We indeed have others from NATO doing training in Afghanistan. Of course, we're doing the bulk of the training there. That's part of the point, is that we should have others doing it in Libya because we've got such a burden in other parts of the world. And because, by the way, we need to reserve some of our capabilities for potentially other crises in other parts of the world. And we also have to be careful. I mean, there is an Afghanistan lesson here. We armed the Taliban with stingers, and then we had to go around trying to buy them back so that when we started fighting them, they wouldn't use them against us. So we need to know that the arms are going to go to people who are responsible, who are the people we want to support, and not Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, who come from the eastern part of Libya, and there are already indications that they're streaming back there. So we just need to be cautious about it. But I'm all in favor of building the capability of the Libyan opposition. My question is whether we need to be doing that, because consistent with my view that we should not be out in the lead here, I think we should look to others to do it.
Could I quickly say,
yes, please.
Let's not forget, the reason why we failed in Afghanistan was after we helped them to drive the Russians out, the United States of America abandoned Afghanistan. They totally abandoned it and left it to the mercies of, finally, the Taliban after the fighting. So that should be the lesson here in the Maghreb and in the Arab world. And second, could I also point out that the best way to make sure that you have Al-Qaeda on the rise would be to have a stalemate, and the bitterness and anger that would prevail amongst young Arab men about our failure to help them overthrow this cruel and brutal dictator who, by the way, has the blood of 190 Americans on his hands as a result of the bombing of Pan Am 103.
Which gets us to the issue of whether a negotiated settlement should be sought here. Of course, the African Union came up with a proposal this week. The Qadhafi sort of said he might accept it. It was a roadmap to a negotiated settlement, and the rebels have rejected it because it would imply that Qadhafi could remain in power. Explain more, Ambassador, why even the suggestion of a negotiated settlement, such as the one they laid out on the table, was a non-starter for you all.
Well, just let me go a little bit to what has been said about the armament of the opposition. To get rid of Gaddafi, we need two things: the pressure, political pressure, and we need the NATO to be effective. And the third thing, we need to arm the Libyan people to take care of Gaddafi on the ground. Without these three things, Gaddafi will not move. The armament of the Libyan opposition is not only responsibility of the NATO, it is the responsibility of the international community. They have to help these people to get rid of this regime. If we stay behind, you will see what happened to all of us. Concerning the proposal from the African Union, well, I said, the first comment I made about this, I said, this is Gaddafi's initiative.
This is Gaddafi's
This is Gaddafi's initiative, I said. My comments about it came because they did not discuss with Gaddafi's how he's going to leave the country. When there is this issue with him, he said, no, this is not for the discussion. Then if this is not a discussion, there is no peace initiative is going to succeed and is not and going to be accepted by the council or by the Libyan people. Any peace initiative, it have to take care of this, that Gaddafi's, his family, they are not part of the democratic process in Libya. Libyan people, they cannot believe what Gaddafi is saying. They cannot believe what Saif, his son, is saying. Saif has been telling people for the last 10 years about reform, about democracy, about constitution. But everybody was surprised when he made his speeches on the 21st of February, what he's telling people. He tells them that we have to judge to the arms. Then but in the same time, we have to thank the African Union. They came with this initiative now, but the door is open. We have to find a political solution for Gaddafi's exit, but not for more than that. There is no way for Gaddafi to stay, because if Gaddafi stays, the people who die in the battlefield, they're honored. But the people Gaddafi who slaughter them in the street, that would be a different case. Then they will die either in the battlefield, or Gaddafi will kill them.
Martin Indyk, weigh in on this, and let me also reintroduce, I mean, the Turks are trying to also get some sort of a peace negotiation started, and the National Security Advisor to President Erdogan said on this stage yesterday that it's partly very much in the interest of just saving civilian lives, that if you can end the killing and then start down a roadmap, you could ultimately get to regime change. What do you say to all this?
Yeah, I think that if the primary mission is to protect civilian lives, then a ceasefire for the time being can be a useful way of achieving that. I think now that the contact group has made very clear that, and the President of the United States has made clear that the objective is that he should go, that doesn't mean that if he doesn't go when there's a ceasefire, that's the end of the story. And I think we need patience here, strategic patience here, to understand that, just as Senator Kerry said yesterday, Senator McCain wasn't here for that, neither you, Margaret, but he made the case that basically over time, Qadhafi is weak, he's isolated, he can't sell his oil, he can't get access to funds. He is on a downward slope towards his demise. It will come sooner or later. And the opposition is growing in strength. And with training and arming, it will be much better than the ragtag army that it is today. And a political process that begins with a ceasefire doesn't end with a ceasefire. And ceasefires can end too when the circumstances change. So I am not at all opposed to the idea of a political deal that stops the killing of the civilians, relieves Misrata, which is another humanitarian crisis already unfolding there, and then we keep the pressure to get rid of Qadhafi over time. But I want to emphasize again, it's up to the Libyan people. The negotiations have to be with the Libyan people, and Qadhafi's removal has to be achieved by the Libyan people.
Senator.
I feel that a ceasefire would be, we should hope for it, that it would happen immediately, but I also believe that any precondition would have to be the departure of Qadhafi and his family. If that doesn't happen, then we now no longer have a strategy, but we have a hope. We have a hope that pressures from outside and the other things would then sooner or later cause Qadhafi to leave or collapse. We harbored that same hope in Iraq for 11 years when, after Desert Storm, we imposed embargo, sanctions, and a no-fly zone. And 11 years later, Saddam Hussein was able to survive. So I would hope that one of the reasons why I argued forcefully for the re-entry of U.S. air power was because I think the likelihood of Qadhafi's departure will be to a large degree dictated by events on the ground. And if Qadhafi feels that his regime is in danger, then obviously he's more likely to try to find maybe a trip to Venezuela or the International Criminal Court, or hopefully to meet Stalin and Hitler. But with a stalemate on the battlefield, I think would give anyone, particularly someone as maniacal as Qadhafi is, hope and a stronger desire to hang on to power. And I just can't imagine that it would be in the region or American national security interest to see Qadhafi, a third-rate military power, fight the United States and NATO to a standstill.
But can I
Yes.
just intervene here, Senator, because I don't, you say that's what I'm advocating is a hope and what you're advocating is a strategy, but I don't understand how the strategy that you're advocating actually gets rid of Qadhafi. So I honestly would like to understand, how does it play out in your scenario?
Well, first of all, it almost played out, as I mentioned, if we had declared a no-fly zone when the rebels were literally at close to Tripoli, but that's over. I think, in the words of Mr. Bismarck, the issue will be decided by blood and iron. And if the rebels are given sufficient support and help, that I am confident that they can prevail. I'm also confident that if you have this kind of back and forth stalemate, that can only encourage Qadhafi because he sees success on the battlefield, or at least a stalemated situation. And again, I greatly respect Martin's service to the country. He's one of the most knowledgeable people that I know. And I think that this dialogue is both respectful and necessary to be carried out, not only here in this wonderful forum, but every place in the country. Because I think that what's at risk here is far more than just Libya. I think what happens in Libya will have enormous effect in the Maghreb and around the Arab world.
Yeah, if I may say, the ceasefire, I think it should be observed only after Gaddafi is withdraw his forces from the cities he's under his control. That maybe we will feel that he's a little bit serious about what he's going to do. But before that, from the NATO, from the opposition, there should be no ceasefire. When the former foreign minister of Gaddafi's, he's announcing the TV that they accept the United Nations resolution, United Nations Security Council, the same time the Gaddafi's forces attacking Benghazi and Misrata. Then the non-fly zone have to be there. The NATO must exercise their daily business to get the Gaddafi's forces, and the opposition must be armed and trained to take care of the issue.
But are you saying the rebels might accept a ceasefire that didn't actually, as a prerequisite, have Qaddafi leave, as long as he literally, it was observable, withdrew all of his forces?
No, I think, look, if the NATO keep the very close eye on what Gaddafi's movement. And that now they're making, their opposition, they're making a lot of progress at this time. Then the Tripoli, the biggest, the capital, the city, then they will rise up against Gaddafi. You will see what's happening if these people, they can leave their houses. They're being captured prisoner of their houses now more than 5 weeks. The snipers on the roofs and the mercenaries in the streets. Then this, why he's doing that? He is doing that because he knows very well that if the Libyan, if the inhabitants of Tripoli, they have a chance to move, to march against him, then that's the end of Gaddafi. Unfortunately, they have not been able. Any more than 2, they will shoot.
You know, we're all, and I want to go to questions from the audience, but we're all talking about Qaddafi leaving and the rebels prevailing, but what do we see actually replacing Qaddafi? Or is that not really our, by our, I mean every country that's intervened, concern?
I believe this is not, I believe this is already, the Libyans thought about this very carefully, and this is why at the first stage they formed the Transitional National Libyan Council. The representative of this council, they are from every city in Libya. They are ready to get rid of, to take care of Libya after Gaddafi is not around. Our problem is not what's happening to Libya after Gaddafi. Our problem is how we get rid of Gaddafi. But apart from that, Gaddafi tried to make, to describe what's happening in Libya as a civil war. There is no civil war in Libya.
Right,
there is people rising against their dictatorship. And if this war this crisis take more than it should, that you will see the terrorists, they're taking the advantage, and that the North Africa in general, that will be unstable and will have problems.
So Senator, Mr. Ndick, go.
I think we would want to work with the rest of the Arab world and with our European friends. And let's face it, the Europeans have a greater interest in Libya than the United States does. There's $30 billion in frozen assets that could be used to help this transition, but we would have to be of significant assistance to them in doing something that they certainly never have had a glimmer of hope for during actually their entire existence, and that is a democratic and free society. So I think the funds would be there. I think the assistance of the rest of the Maghreb and the Arab world would be there. And I think that the effort, particularly by our European friends, would be very legitimate. My concern, Margaret, about the whole situation of the Arab Spring is that there's so much focus, and it's understandable focus, on our spending practices and our budgetary woes and our debt and our deficit, that we may make a mistake by not doing the things that are necessary to see these countries make a transition. The people in this room know better than I do how fragile it is in some of these countries and how difficult, if not impossible, it may be in others. But I believe that the one thing they want from us is not for us to tell them what to do, but they want investment and jobs, and they want investment so they can create jobs. A young woman who is a civil society activist in Tunisia told me, Senator McCain, we are not worried about the first election. We're worried about the second election if we don't provide for the jobs and the economic growth and satisfy the aspirations of these young people. So my job is to try to educate my fellow citizens that it is in United States national security interest to see these transitions made to democratic and prosperous nations. And that won't be easy in a place like Yemen.
Could I just say I agree completely, 100% with what the Senator just said. But precisely because I agree with him on that, I think we should be very careful about getting sucked into what happens in Libya, because Libya is not the main game. Egypt is the main game. Saudi Arabia, what happens in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf is the main game. What's going to happen in Syria now? is critically important. And what's interesting about what's happening in Syria is that there's the big concern that, you know, if Gaddafi isn't overthrown, it's going to kind of stop the Arab awakening in its tracks. And then, you know, it'll be back to business as usual. But we see that it's not true. Gaddafi is not overthrown, and now it's spreading to more and more towns and cities in Syria, in Aleppo today, which is a dramatic development. And so I don't see that Libya has such profound implications on what happens, as compared with if we don't get it right in Egypt, if we don't help produce the very jobs and hope that Senator McCain is talking about. And I worry about the bandwidth of our own government, the resources that we have available, and if we get distracted and committed in a place where we don't have a vital strategic interest, then what I really fear is we lose the big game, and we end up like a situation we had in Lebanon, where we sent in the troops, we declared a vital strategic interest, and then when we lost, what was it, 230 in the Marine barracks, we pulled out because we didn't have a vital strategic interest in Lebanon. So I really think that it's very important that we make a wise choice about where we're going to invest our resources, which do have limitations.
I think a seminal moment was when the Arab League sided with the no-fly zone. And I think there were a variety of reasons for that. And one of them is because the Arab world knows Qaddafi for what he is. A guy who hatched assassination plots against other leaders in the Arab world. Pan Am 109, other terrorist acts that he had committed in the past, and plots and would-be efforts to destabilize or even assassinate leaders of other countries. If this guy stays in power, then what do you think that he's going to do, if he could possibly do? And again, the best way to get Al-Qaeda back in extremist elements is to have him remain in power, in my view, there. But I do not believe the United States should take the lead role in Libya once Qaddafi goes. I think that should be a European responsibility. They have much greater involvement and much greater interest there. Look at the immigration problem that already we're getting from Tunisia. But at the same time, the United States of America leads, and we would have to also play a key role, in my view, in helping this transition to a free and democratic nation.
Let me go to questions from the audience, and let's see how many we have, because we might combine a couple. We have a lot. So why don't the two gentlemen right at that table, both right there, you, yes, ask your questions, and we'll combine them just so we can finish in the allotted time. Oh, Mike, I'm sorry. Mike will be coming your way right here.
Hello, I'm Juan Cole at the University of Michigan. I just want to underline the old saw that politics makes for strange bedfellows, and say how much I admire and support Senator McCain's position on this. I think it's often off the radar, the role that Muammar Gaddafi has played in Africa in the past 20 years, and the ways in which he was involved in backing Charles Taylor, Foday Sanko in Sierra Leone, in intervening in the civil wars in West Africa, occupying Chad. The idea that if he came back to power and had billions to play with, that he would let Tunisia evolve in a democratic way seems to me silly, because he came out against the changes in Tunisia, and I think he has fingers into Egypt as well. So I really suggest, I would like the reaction of the panelists to the idea that Gaddafi's return to power, having the resources that he has, given his past role, wouldn't he be a danger to the Arab Spring? Wouldn't he be an anti-democratic force in the region?
Okay, and that's a great question. And Juan Cole, hello. I know you so well by satellite, but not in person. And yes, sir.
Yes, Mark Open, George Mason University. Senator McCain, you've made a wonderful case, a very powerful case. I just want to say that some of this has been framed, a lot of this has been framed in terms of vital strategic American interests. But some of us as Americans feel that the principal problem in the U.S. Islamic relationship is only thinking in vital interests and not thinking about moral choices. So, Ambassador, I'd like you to help us make a moral choice in terms of whether you feel, we don't know, many of us, what's actually happening in Tripoli. We don't know what would happen, whether there would be truly a reconciliation if the rebels took over and the family left. Could you just say a little bit more to help us make a moral choice about what's best for the people here? We need more information, I feel. Thank you.
So who would like to go first? Immediately on my left.
Well, look, I think we need a little bit of humility here, Juan. You know, we were in bed with Qadhafi for the last 10 years. If he was creating a great strategic problem for us in Africa, it sure wasn't evident to George W. Bush and Condoleezza Rice, who was the first Secretary of State to visit him in Tripoli. You know, so I'm all in favor of making a moral choice here in favor of intervention in support of the Libyan people to prevent him from killing his people. But, you know, there's a lot of other moral choices that have to be made here. At this point, Syrian regime has killed as many people as Qadhafi has. And what are we doing about that? You know, or what did we do in so many different places in Africa? So, you know, why Libya? What's so compelling about Libya is something that we all have to think about. So I'm not against it. I think it's a good idea, what we did. But the notion that we have to go to Tripoli and remove Qadhafi is not something that I think is justified by the situation. That's up to the Libyan people. We'll support them, but they're the ones that have to take care of business in Tripoli.
Senator.
I thank you for the comment and thank you for the question. And you really have raised what is the subject of debate and will be ongoing for as long as I've been around. And that is, where are our interests, our values, our interests, and vice versa? And obviously, that's the tug-of-war between the Wilsonian principles and realpolitik. And my view is that, of course, we didn't want Darfur to happen. Of course, we don't want to see what happened in Ivory Coast and all of these other places in the world where terrible things are happening. But you immediately have to ask yourself the question, could you beneficially affect the outcome? And I don't see, frankly, how I can beneficially affect the outcome in Ivory Coast. And maybe even in some of the other places where, well, in Syria, I don't see how the United States could intervene and beneficially affect the outcome, although obviously I'm rooting for the students. So in the case of Libya, though, we saw a clear-cut case of a slaughter about to take place in Benghazi, and at the 11th hour, thank God for the Arab League resolution, we were able to prevent that. But the resolution said all necessary means for humanitarian purposes, and obviously that didn't mean, it didn't just say Benghazi. So when we have the ability and the mandate to try to prevent people from being slaughtered, massacred, being mistreated, the cruelties and torture that have characterized Qaddafi's regime, then I think we should act. But I also think that if we do act, then we should make sure that we determine the outcome. I say with great respect to this administration, they seem to be more interested in getting in and getting out than devising a strategy to succeed in achieving our policy aims as stated by the President of the United States, that Qaddafi must go, then leaving us in a position that if we fail, then obviously the view of American abilities and power is diminished. And one of the things I worry a great deal about in the world today is the perception of a decline of America's influence, particularly in that region of the world.
Mr. Ambassador.
Well, thank you. Well, I think Gaddafi now is the most dangerous person, I believe, on earth now, after what he did his people. The Libyan people, they are facing not a normal procedures taken by the government to stop the demonstration. They've been struck by airplanes. They've been killed by tanks. Then it is a special case. How many people were killed in Tunisia? 300? In Egypt, 350? How many? In Benghazi, just by itself, 3,000 now. In Tripoli, more than 5,000. Now the total of the people killed by Gaddafi now is more than 10,000. 20,000 young people they kidnapped from their houses in Tripoli now. Then it is extraordinary regime and extraordinary procedures of Gaddafi's to solve this problem. What happening in Syria, what happening in Egypt, what happening in Yemen, and what happening in Tunisia compared with Libya. There is no comparison at all. It is a human case more than a political case now. Then the international community, they have obligation. They don't want to see another massacre after Srebrenica, after Rwanda. They want to give example. Libya, if Gaddafi managed to reach Benghazi on the 19th of February without the intervention of the French air, that will be a disaster and massacre. Second thing, Libyan people, they're not poor. They have resources, but they have dignity at the same time. We don't want anybody to pay our bill. We will take care of that. But we need your support. We need the help to get rid of this regime. What's happening after Gaddafi? Libya, when it was getting the independence in 1951, 59 Libyans graduated from the universities. And they managed to build a country with democratic institutions. Now, there are thousands of Libyans who've been graduated from Europe, from the United States, from all over the world. And the Libyans, they united for two things. Gaddafi is not there, and democracy have to be achieved. They are thirsty, they are hungry for the last 42 years. Then we have a council responsible, and I'm sure they will take care of Libya.
And I think people here are thirsty and hungry, and I'd have to wrap this up. But other questions? I might take three here. People have been signaling me, yes? Right at this table, and then I'd say the table right behind. Here comes the mic.
Thank you very much for the discussion. And I see a major agreement, really, between the senator and Martin in that Gaddafi has got to go. I think you both disagree on how he should go. But for the Senator McCain, if you would be kind enough to chart, imagine a course regarding Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, and regarding Syria, if more Shia are killed in Bahrain by the Bahraini regime and the Saudi military in Bahrain, and if Assad kills more of his people, how do you imagine our policy should be vis-a-vis those two situations?
And I'm sorry, could you give your name and...
I'm Emil Naqli. Thank you.
And there was another question right over here. Yes, sir, right behind.
Yes, thank you very much. Just a couple of...
Could you just...
David Holdridge, Bridging the Divide President. Just a couple of references here. Senator, you referred to the military, Qaddafi's military, as third rate. And second one is, if there's a message from Sidi Bouzid and Tahrir, it seems to me it's about made in the Middle East. My question is, why don't we have a situation where the Arab League is represented by Egypt, a military that's been sourced and trained by the United States for 30 years, take the lead in protecting civilian lives in Libya with the active support of the United States? That's made in the Middle East. That is not reaching out, once again, to Europe and the United States to fix an Arab problem. Thank you.
And that gets to this gentleman right here, and then I'm going to ask this young woman back here, and then we'll just have final responses. Is there a mic nearby, near this table? if you just raise your hand, sir, so that, and just in the interest of time, if you can be as brief as possible.
Okay, sure. Mohammed al-Satuhi. I was certainly hoping for a shock and awe in Libya. Unfortunately, we didn't get it, but I certainly can understand a policy even if I don't understand it. But in this case, I'm not sure I understand the US policy. On one side, you say we need Qadhafi to go. A stalemate is not helpful. We don't need a stalemate. But everything we are doing here in the United States could lead to this result. So we don't push him out. We don't support the opposition to push him out. So what are we doing here? Actually, unfortunately, this could lead to the very result we are afraid of. And with regard to national interest, Martin Endick, can we just wait until we see Al-Qaeda, like what happened in Afghanistan, so we can have a national interest in Libya? This could be another result to lead to a national security concern in Libya. And how about Egypt with the relationship between the two countries? So I just need you to make sense of the current policy. And Mr. Ojali, I would just appreciate it if you can help us. All the time you face this issue, we can't arm the opposition because we don't understand the opposition. Can you help us understand the opposition?
Okay, and we'll do one final question. The young woman right back here.
My name is Amy Chu. I'm from Malaysia, and I just came out from Benghazi, where I went to the front line as well. Senator McCain, you may just want to know that the people in the eastern part of Libya do thank the international community for the airstrikes. And we have talked about Gaddafi stepping down, but there does not seem to be any clear exit strategy. People want him to step down, but where is he going to go? There has been no country that seemed to have stepped forward to give him to a place. And he's like a cornered person. And when a person is cornered, somebody who has survived for 42 years will just lash out in the most vicious and brutal way. And just one...
I'm sorry, do you mind if I cut you off there? Because we're already, the red clock started. And we'll just let everyone sum up. And it seems to me there's a theme here, which is, in what circumstances does the U.S. really intervene? What makes, it's a question Mr. Indyk put on the table at the beginning, Libya different from the others? And you heard all the other questions, but who would like to go first? Mr. Ashley, why don't you go first this round? To the 4 questions, Mr. Ambassador.
Yeah. Well, who are the opposition? The opposition, they are ordinary Libyan people. They are students, they are jobless, they are professors, they are some of the official army. They are ordinary Libyan people. Find themselves that challenging the regime, and the regime is using every kind of arms to kill them. Then the council, I want anybody just to can tell me that if there is any relation between any member of the council and any extremist organization. This is not exist in Libya. And Gaddafi find it very easy to claim that, oh, what's happening in Libya is extremist, and it is received unfortunately in the West, and we will not be able to explain to them. And I have answered this question hundred of times, but still this question is buried. There is no Al-Qaeda in Libya, but if this crisis takes too long, that maybe we will have problem with Al-Qaeda. And that's maybe, as Satuhi said, we will have the American interest then to come and help the Libyans. Then I don't want this to happen, but if I want to tell you, they are former, some of them, the council members, they are former ministers, they try to help, but they resign, and because they came to the dead end.
Senator.
As I mentioned earlier, each one of these nations is different, and we have a tendency sometime to lump them all together. I think Bahrain is very different from Syria, which is very different from Yemen, which is very different from Libya. In the case of Bahrain, I would say that I think that we should do everything we can to moderate any pain or punishment or repression that is inflicted on the Shiite majority in Bahrain, and we should expect progress towards further reforms and democratization. But I'd like to mention one reality. Bahrain does not pose a threat to the United States' vital national security interest, and you could argue that if there is a violent overthrow of the governing body, that the Iranians would significantly increase their influence in a vital area of the country. In Syria, I continue to be confused by people who say, well, maybe we want Bashar to stay in power. This is the same country where suicide bombers from all over the Arab world would land at the airport in Damascus and be taken into Iraq and kill Americans. That's what the regime in Damascus did, among many other things. I'd love to see Bashar Assad overthrown, and I'll take my chances on who takes his place. As far as the Egyptian military is concerned, I think under normal circumstances you might make that argument. I think there's very little doubt with the tremendous transition and all of that's going on in Egypt right now that the Egyptian military is not going to do anything but try to adjust and accommodate to this change that's going on. It was a little disturbing to see that they sentenced one of these bloggers to prison just the other day and removed the protesters from the square. The question, you don't understand what the policy is? I don't either. I don't either. I don't see how you can, on the one hand, say that he must go, and then at the same time say we're not going to use force to make him go. The reality is they are trying to adjust to American policy is that he must go, but the mandate of the UN Security Council and the Arab League is simply no-fly and humanitarian. That you can't square that circle, but they keep trying. Yes, in Benghazi they are grateful for the airstrikes. They're also not happy that there's not enough. Their military leadership has called for additional efforts. How you get from all the way to Abjabia and going across a long desert without being attacked by and taken out is still something that I don't quite understand. It means we're not making maximum use of air power. Our friends and allies, I appreciate, they're not using the most precision weapons that the United States of America's air power has. Could I just say again, in summary, and I'm sorry for the long comment, but overall I sound disturbed about Libya, and I am very concerned about it, and I believe that we can succeed. But I am also excited and exuberant and exhilarated by what's happening in the Maghreb and in the Arab world. I think the Arab Spring will spread to China and Russia and other countries in the world. This is a seismic event of incredible historical proportion. I'm glad I'm alive to see it, and I believe that we now have an opportunity to provide hope and democracy and freedom to people who have never known it. That's the most exciting legacy of the United States of America if we assist them in achieving it.
And Mark.
I agree with that.
Thank you.
I agree with that. But let me just go to the question of made in the Middle East, because I think it's at the heart of the issue. I don't think that the Egyptian army can be deflected from its task of being the so-called midwife of the transition to democracy in Egypt. You know, there's a French Foreign Legion. That's what it's for. If the French have a vital interest here, let them come in and let them help the Libyan rebels take Tripoli. But I don't think it's a good idea to divert the Egyptians from their task. But I do think it's absolutely essential that this remain made in the Middle East, and that's the answer to your question about the gap between the objective and the resources that are put for it. I'll say it again, third time. It's up to the Libyan people what happens to Qadhafi. It's up to the Syrian people what happens to Assad. We can certainly be there to support them. But I don't think we should have been out there, our president should have been out there saying Qadhafi must go. I think we should be saying it's up to the Libyans to decide whether Qadhafi must go. And if they decide they must go, then we will support them. And that's what we're doing, is supporting them. And that's the way we reconcile our objectives to the resources that we're prepared to put into them. Well, I want to come back and final note on Syria. Because we're so preoccupied with Libya, there's no talk. Where's the talk about freezing Assad's assets? Where's the talk about taking him to the Human Rights Council? What are we doing about what's happening in the heart of the Middle East? And that's just one part of the problem I have in being distracted to a humanitarian problem in Libya that we can take care of and not get focused on getting rid of Qadhafi. Let's help the Libyan people take care of him.
We have to leave it there. Senator John McCain, Ambassador Ali Al-Khali, and Martin Indyk, thank you all. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That was terrific.
Stay in your seats because dinner is about to be served, and then Margaret